Hey everyone, welcome back to Today in Tech. I'm Juliette Beauchamp and I am here as always with Computer World Executive Editor Ken Mingus as well as Macworld Executive Editor Michael Simon. We are live on YouTube as well as on LinkedIn on the Computer World LinkedIn page. So if you have any questions while we're talking, please do leave them in the comments below and we will do our very best to get back to you and answer your question while we're actually live. So the topic of the day, the global chip shortage is kind of finally catching up to and affecting Apple. It's something that we've been talking about a little bit on our channel, and I will link a video that I did with IDC analyst Mario Morales. He's in charge of their semiconductor group, talking about what sort of the implications of the chip shortage and who was most affected. For a while, car makers, automakers were kind of like the most affected group. But now even smartphone makers, which were largely thought of to be going to be the least affected just because they have so much influence over the supply chain and ability to sort of stockpile, it's coming to Apple. Tim Cook said that there's probably going to be an issue, but these aren't with Apple's own made chips. So I'm going to throw it to you guys first. What exactly is the chip issue? Because it's not like Apple is at a loss for their A and M series chips.
Michael, you or me? What do you think?
You can go first.
Oh, thanks.
I'm a gentleman.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, this all came out during Apple's earnings call this year, Juliet, or this week. And even though Apple had, a really good quarter, I think it was like 81.4 billion in revenue, about half of that from the iPhone. One of the things that came up in the conversation after the announcement was this, that as you just said, the chip shortage that's been plaguing the world basically since the pandemic really hit last year and disrupted supply chains has caught up with Apple. And, we've talked a lot since last year about Apple producing its own chips, the M1 for Macs, and wanting to get its hands on as much of the supply chain as it can. And this is exactly why, because it doesn't want to be caught in a situation where it's got a market, people who want to buy its products, and it can't push them out fast enough because of supply chain shortages. I thought it was interesting that what Cook said, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but that the chips that Apple's having trouble getting are the fairly common ones that are used in devices. It's not the high-end things, because obviously there's a lot of manufacturers competing for the same product, and Apple's constrained just like other people. I get that right, Michael?
Yeah, Cook calls them legacy nodes, is what he said, and that's kind of a catch-all for, as you say, like the ones that we don't really hear about or care about or even wonder about. But they're imperative to making these things work, like display drivers and audio drivers or audio chips that drive sound, like simple components that are probably 10 cents, maybe less for someone like Apple who deals in the tens of millions every quarter, but they're getting harder to make due to a variety of factors. Prices are going up, and even though Apple's in the front of the line, most likely, or near the front of the line, they still warn that it could affect a bit of the iPhone going forward. And, that's the iPhone 13, which is coming out in, at this point, about a month, maybe about 6 weeks.
That's 6 weeks.
And the reason why I think that Apple made sure that investors on the call knew that is because, for one, I just said one and A at the same time. One is fine. For one, the iPhone when it comes out is always somewhat constrained. I mean, lots of people want it all at once on day one, and they rush to buy it.
Me.
Apple, yeah, you're one of them. I usually buy one. I mean, we're a drop in the bucket. There's tens of millions of people who buy them all on pre-order day and launch day. And they're usually sold out, all except for certain colors and certain higher end storage configurations. But it sounds like this year they might have less stock to start out with, which is where the constraints come in. So they're anticipating X number of buyers wanting this phone. They're anticipating having less X number of phones on hand to ship, and that's where the trouble comes in. But it should be stated that Apple said the same thing about this quarter in the iPad and the Mac, and they did pretty well. So yes, there are
Yeah.
constraints. Is it dire? I don't think so.
No, I don't think it's dire. I mean, it's only dire if you're an Apple fan and you really want to get that iPhone on day one.
On day one,
Yeah.
yeah, and we're,
And-
we're still seeing issues with some, some iMac configurations are a little out, maybe days or weeks than they would normally be. iPad, particularly the 12.9-inch screen, also, some stores have it in stock, some stores don't. Some shipping is like a week. No, it's not like you're getting it in like October. You just have to wait a little bit longer. And when you're talking about the tail end of a quarter, so if this comes out in September 30th is the end of that quarter,
Mhm.
that could be the difference between like $2 or $3 billion. And that's why they wanted to let that known. Hey, we might not sell as many iPhones as we would normally or would like to in this quarter. We're, as consumers, taking it as, everyone rushed to buy at 8 a.m. on September 21st because they're going to be going. That's probably not the case. I mean, Apple's dealing in very large volume here. So when they warn, it's not like they're going to be sold out in 12 seconds. They're going to, it's going to take, maybe
At least a couple.
a little bit shorter. There'll be a little bit shorter stock than usual.
Yeah. To reinforce the point though, and this goes back to the earnings this week, the quarterly earnings of that $81.4 billion, just about half of it was.
Yeah,
the iPhone.
almost
That's why this
exactly.
matters,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
The iPhone it's a huge part of Apple's business.
Yeah.
It affects every single aspect of what they do. Services, iPhone, everything. The iPhone fuels everything. I think it's responsible for the boom in the Mac, because people who were using the iPhone all of a sudden needed a new computer for work from home or school from home or whatever it is. They know iPhone, they know Apple, they go to the Mac. I mean, it's all iPhone. So yeah, it matters, but I don't think it's going to be disastrous. And it's also not an issue affecting only Apple. So it's not like everyone else is selling phones and Apple isn't. Any new phone that's coming out or even being made, like the Google Pixel 6, is coming out probably in October. They're going to have the same problem because it's as you said, Julia, it's components. So Apple's A series chip, they might have some supply issues there as well. It's not going to be nearly as noticeable as these little components that they need to ship every iPhone that they sell.
Right.
Just to make one quick point, about the original iPad launch this year and the warnings, constrained supply, et cetera, et cetera. To Michael's point, there was constrained supply for the first few weeks, maybe, in the sense that you would order an iPad and you wouldn't get it for 2 to 3 weeks, when normally it might have been available the next day or within a week, that sort of thing. But that, as the earnings show, they obviously got past that. And I think we'll see the same thing this fall with the iPhone, barring anything else we don't expect in terms of.
We can say they got.
environment.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead. No, it's okay. Go ahead.
We can say that they got past it, but iPad sales were quite a bit down, right? And if I'm looking at it right now, if I go to buy a new iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch Pro, I'm not getting it till August 13th. That's still constrained.
It's 2 weeks, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But it's constrained, and Apple is dealing with a lot fewer iPad Pro shipments than they are iPhone.
That's a good
So
point.
we might be looking at a September, buying in September, getting it in early October,
Sure.
Do you think there might
which
be
we've seen before.
Would there be a situation, Michael, where they might divvy it up so that they would roll some of them out earlier? And
Sure,
some of
they've
them
done
a
that
week
before
later?
to
Yeah.
constrain. They did it with the iPhone. They started that with the iPhone 10 a couple years ago,
Right.
and it's continued. The Mini and the 12 this year, I believe. There was two of them.
Yeah,
I
the
can't
Pro
remember. I
Max
can't remember
came
how
out
they
later.
split it, but they've done that in the past. The 10R a couple of years ago came out later than the other ones because of the screens and stuff. Yeah, I can see that happening.
So
It all depends on how many they can make and how many they think they're going to sell.
So I kind of want to look a little bit future facing and start off with this question from one of our viewers on LinkedIn, and bears repeating. If you have any questions, please do let us know either in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments on LinkedIn, and we'll do our best to get back to them while we're live. I can definitely take the first part of this question. So this viewer from LinkedIn asked, "It's so unusual. Do you think that we will face such shortages in the future, or will the supply chain consider it as a case study to work work on it better. So I discussed this a few weeks back with Mario Morales, who I referenced in my intro, the IDC Semiconductor Group head, and it's an issue. It is kind of like a perfect storm of an issue in that obviously the pandemic really slowed production, and I mean factories had to close. It was a big problem. That being said, I mean that could happen again, but I'm kind of wondering, is there a world in which Apple, so supply chain aside, so maybe the supply chain could learn from this, but I mean, if there's a pandemic and people can't go to work and people can't make the parts, like that's just kind of how it goes. So on the topic of Apple specifically, is there like a universe in which Apple says, okay, we've seen that this happens, enough of that, we're going to make our own display components, we're going to make our own port components, etc.? What do you guys think?
I mean, I think that's always on the table. I mean, they've
Yeah.
already demonstrated their prowess in making this stuff. I doubt it comes to that.
Yeah.
This is a perfect storm of crunching of everything, the pandemic and price hikes and factories not being able to build, material shortage. Like there's a lot of stuff that happened, plus people buying things all at once. Like everything kind of happened at once. I think the supply chain will fix itself. Maybe prepare a little better in the event that this thing happens again. I don't know if it's really cost effective for Apple to make these things. Like I said, they don't cost, they cost like, pennies,
Nothing
per unit
for them. Yeah.
And they have these, these partnerships with people, and they're always changing them based on availability and price and, who's supplying what. I mean, Apple doesn't even make its own displays. So there's a lot of components here that they would have to start making if they want to make everything. So I think, obviously the CPU, GPUs, that's their priority. And whatever comes with that, like they're going to make their own 5G modem, like the major components, I think, yes, it's important for them to make that stuff. If for no other reason, then they want to make it the best and the most efficient that they can. All these other little chips, I'd be surprised if they got into that game. They're not Samsung, they're not LG. Like they're they're very focused on their specific units, and I think it would just muddy the waters a little bit too much.
Well, and the issue here too is not so much the components, it's a supply chain. And I mean,
Right.
Apple and other companies are doing things to try to diversify in terms of, setting up shops, I think in India, Vietnam, other
Yep.
parts of
Brazil
Asia.
is a big area now too.
what's that?
Brazil is also big
Yeah.
for manufacturing.
But I don't see them, either doing what you're saying, Mike, which is, they're not going to take on building all these little baby parts, the teeny parts, important, but not profitable in the way that Apple would want to be profitable. And they're not going to be moving everything back to the US. That's not going to happen either. So they're going to have to figure out some way to get a smarter supply chain. And I do wonder if, as technology advances, whether we'll see things like machine learning and AI get more involved in the supply chain to try to work these kinks out and spot, constraints before they affect the product line at the end.
Yeah, maybe. And I'm not sure that isn't happening. I just think this one was, I don't think, let's say Apple did make all of its own parts and made 100% of the stuff for the iPhone. I don't think they would have been immune to this. This was a confluence of events that, shipping delays and, a freighter got caught in a strait. Like it is, so many things contributed to where we're at right now. And it's still not to the point where, like, people can't get this stuff. Apple just made $81 billion in a non-holiday, non-anything quarter.
Mhm.
So they're doing fine. They're getting parts. Parts are there. They're just warning that, hey, instead of making 80, whatever, what was their guidance? 70, I forget. I mean, they didn't have full guidance, but they had like a range of what it could affect. And, they're still going to meet the numbers that they want to meet, and they're still going to sell a ridiculous amount of products. When we're dealing with Wall Street, and particularly Apple and Google and Microsoft and these big giant companies, a couple of $1 billion is the difference between your stock tanking. So they're just warning months early, hey, this could happen. Let's not forget last year, they warned about the whole year, and they had a monster year. So it doesn't always play out the way they say, and Apple has a habit of under promising and over delivering. So my guess is they're being extremely conservative and cautious here,
Just for the record, the quarter that just finished, Apple was up 36% year over year,
which is just insane.
which is just insane given the fact that a year ago we were in the throes, or the early throes of the pandemic. And, Jason Snell had a piece on Macworld this week that, you guys had about how Apple officials, or how, I guess it was Luca, had sort of threaded the needle in terms of trying to downplay a little bit how well Apple had done, because, they don't want to look like they're gloating or whatever in the middle of a pandemic. But I mean, Apple got a great year.
It's insane. To put that 81 bill in perspective, so December of 2019, which was right before the pandemic, hit the US, Apple made, I think it was just under 84 in the holiday quarter. And this quarter, they made 81 with no holidays to speak of, like not Christmas, not, it's staggering what they're able to sell and how many people are buying their stuff right now. And services keeps growing. I mean, they are firing on not just all cylinders that they didn't even have a year ago.
Services is huge. Yeah, that was something else I think Jason's piece made. The point was that services have just taken off. And now part of that is pandemic related. People are home, they want to watch streaming videos, and they're,
Yeah, some of that is that. Some of it is the Apple bundle. It's very attractive. And the other part of it is that Apple has done a really good job of building its ecosystem in a way that doesn't make it feel like you're paying Apple every month, but you are.
Boy, am I.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am too. I'm part of, I got the Premier bundle, and I have my whole family hooked up to it. It's $30 a month, but it's like, well, when you break it down, like, well, I'm paying for this, that, and the other thing anyway. So what's $4 more plus I can get my whole family on it. Like they did it in a way. Apple gets this bad rap for overcharging and being a luxury company that you're ripping you off all the time. And I just, in 2021, I don't see that that's the case. Yeah, the iPhone is at the high end of smartphones, and but they also have the iPhone SE. The iPad Pro is $1,100, but they also have the $329 iPad. Like they have done a really good job since Tim Cook took over of really diversifying its product line. Maybe sometimes to a fault where there's some cannibalization and some confusion, but they've done a really good job of getting as many people into their tent as possible, and they're not selling cheap products at that low end at all. The iPhone SE is a fantastic phone. I used it for 6 months. It's great. So, when you make a decision to go to, like, compare Apple and Samsung does make fantastic phones. They also make a lot of cheap, underpowered, very, very low budget phones and everything in between. And, it can be confusing and frustrating if you pick the wrong one. Apple doesn't really have that problem. They offer it. Here's your price range. Here's what you can afford, and you're getting the best that we can deliver at that price range, and probably a little bit better.
So, coming back a little bit to the chip shortage, we have one viewer question, which is kind of supply chain related. So I'll start off with the supply chain related question first. So this is from a LinkedIn viewer, and they were just asking, why does Apple assemble, and I also imagine, twofold, do a lot of manufacturing in China?
Yeah, I mean, that's I mean, it's an issue. I mean, in simple terms, they do it because everybody does it, and it's cheaper. And it's, but in 2021, it's a bit of a flashpoint because there's human rights issues that have always been there, but now they're on the surface. There's a bit of a trade tariff issue that we're still sorting out and dealing with. And, China they don't follow the same rules that the US follows. So when Apple does something like remove an app from the App Store or limit functionality of some social network to its users, people say, well, why are you doing that? And well, because they're operating in the country and they have to follow that country's laws. And Apple at some point is going to have to kind of figure out what it's going to do. And it's not just Apple, it's literally every company in America or every technology company in America has to figure out what they're going to do with the China situation, because I don't think it's going to get any better. If anything, it might get worse as China gets bigger and more powerful. And, this rhetoric continues to fly back and forth. I mean, it's kind of akin to what it was with Russia in the 80s. It's not that dissimilar. So Apple's going to have to figure out what it wants to do there with manufacturing, because it's
Sure.
not going away. It's not an issue that's going away. But I mean, to answer that question, that's how Apple set up its manufacturing, many years ago, and it's not so easy to flip a switch and change it. There are signs. They are making moves, as Ken said before. They're using Vietnam, they're using Brazil. They're diversifying their manufacturing a lot more. To bring it all back to the U.S. is probably impossible at this point. They do some stuff here. I think most notably the Mac Pro is made in Texas, but that's a very high margin, low yield machine. To make like a MacBook Pro here or an iPhone, I mean, it's nearly impossible from a variety of factors. From one, cost; for two, location; and for three, finding people to work. Like, there's a lot there. That's a decade-long project if they were to set that up now.
Yeah, decades-long project.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize, Juliet, is that the supply chain system that has been set up in China is designed to move material to product to shipping to the US as smoothly and frictionlessly as possible. I mean, it is astonishing how the whole supply chain works there, in addition to having a ready supply of workers who do not require minimum wages as we do in the US. And so it would be really difficult for China for Apple or any other company to pull out of China quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it's right now it's impossible. Like, you can't just pivot like that at that scale. And yeah, it's distressing for, just speaking personally, when I read some of the things that I read, even if it's not about Apple's own factories, and a lot of times it is, it's distressing and concerning. And I do hope that Tim Cook and whoever's in charge of that stuff feel the same way I do, because at some point they're going to start to lose customers who don't want to associate themselves with a company that isn't taking a stand against this stuff. At the very least, the conditions inside the factories that they run. And Apple has done a lot over the last, it's been, I don't know, at least 10 years where this stuff has come out. And it's the same as it is everything else. The reporting in China comes out in dribs and drabs because they don't have the press that we have. If that was going on here, we would know about it, it would end, and it would be it. So, we hear about it sometimes years after the fact, and we don't know what's changed and what hasn't.
Sure.
I'd like to believe Apple isn't turning a blind eye to it, but it's business. Business is business. And a lot of times, bottom lines take precedence over, doing the right thing. But to Apple's credit, they have been as transparent as they can be, I guess. Like, they do talk about it, they do address it. And I'd like to think that they are taking the steps that they need to take to make sure that they can do both.
Sure.
And if they can't, they'll gradually, which we've also seen, move away from doing business with not selling iPhones, but doing manufacturing business in China.
Sure. So as we're wrapping up here, we've got one viewer question, and then I think I'm just going to kind of ask a little wrap up question. So the viewer question, this is definitely pivoting a little bit, but they are basically asking that because of perhaps like a supply issue and people not being able to get the latest phone, does that mean that users on older iPhone models, they're referring to, I think, the 6 specifically, like, is there a world in which like they get further software updates? I would imagine the answer to that is no, because there's other phones to upgrade to.
Apple iOS 15 is available on for all of the devices that iOS 14 was available on. So in that sense, yes. If you have iOS 14 on your device, you're going to get iOS 15 on your device.
Is iOS 14 on the 6?
Come with it. 6S, I believe.
Okay.
But Apple's not going to reach back to
no, they're not going to all of a sudden
and extend iOS 15 back. No, short
right.
answer.
Right.
That's not going to happen. But I don't think that decision was related to a potential iPhone shortage. I mean, let's face it. These are luxury. These are not necessities. No one needs. Maybe Ken.
I was just going to say,
Ken. No one
yeah,
no one needs the iPhone 13. The iPhone 6 is plenty good.
Totally.
So like it's not like it's a life or death again, maybe for Ken, but it's not it's not like, oh my God, if I don't have my iPhone 13 right now, what am I supposed to do?
Sure.
We could do all these things in other ways. But like I said, Apple is supporting all of the iOS 14 devices. On iOS 15 will be available for those devices. Not every feature. There's a bunch that don't work with the older processors. But Apple has taken the reins on that for the industry, and we're seeing Samsung and Google respond in kind and guarantee 3 and 5 years. There's rumors that Google, I think, is going to 6, or maybe it's not a rumor. Maybe they did, but they're guaranteeing security updates and major version upgrades, because that's one of the reasons why people stay with them, because their products last. And when you buy an iPhone in 2021, you're getting updates through 2026 at least, which is impressive.
Sure. So as we're wrapping up here, I guess my final question is just, obviously all this information about the, or perhaps not obviously, about the chip shortage was addressed in the Apple's earnings call. Were there any other, big revelations in the earnings call as we're wrapping up here? Or was that kind of, the headline? Besides, or was the other headline, Apple made a lot of money?
One thing that stuck out for me was they said that I'm switching gears to the Apple Watch, that they had a record year or a record quarter for wearables, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. I think Tim or Lucas said 75% of Apple Watch buyers were new to the product.
Wow.
In this quarter, which is just astounding. Unless I misheard that or misread it, that's what they were saying. And usually it's about half, but the Apple Watch is kind of in my mind, the biggest area for growth. The iPad, the iPhone, the Mac, like people buy those, but the Apple Watch is still not at a point yet where it's a must-have device. It's like a nice accessory for some people, but if they can grow that to the point where if they sell 50 million iPhones, then they're selling 25 million watches with that. Like, I think it can get there with some tweaks and with some, as the Apple Watch develops, as it becomes more powerful, maybe with glasses and AR stuff, like there's a way to get that product to be as ubiquitous as the iPhone, I think.
Yeah, I think the thing that jumped out at me, I was surprised to see, and Michael, you talked about this earlier, that with the iPhone driving sales, that at a time when people are not necessarily looking to buy a lot of PCs, Mac sales were very solid.
They were
I
huge.
don't remember the exact number, but it was like, I think 16% of the total, something like that. And and I'm sure some of that's driven by the M1 chip. That's
it was down a bit, but over 8 billion in revenue for the Mac, which
8 billion.
If not for the last 3 quarters, would have been a record.
Eventually, you're talking, money,
and again, it's not back to school, it's not holiday.
No, this is the second quarter.
The iMac is new, but I don't know how many of those they sold. I mean, it's the M1 chip, and it's the iPhone halo effect really, really taking hold of the industry, I think.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's impressive. The Mac has grown. I mean, last quarter, I think it was up like 70%. It's crazy how many Macs they've sold in the last 3 months. Some, like I said, partially due to the M1, but also just in general. And there's a lot coming. New MacBook Pros, redesigned MacBook Pros, redesigned Mac Mini, maybe a high-end iMac. There's a lot in the pipeline that's going to only fuel even more. We said this a couple of weeks ago. We have not gotten a Pro M1 Mac yet. Hasn't happened. So that's a whole pent-up market that's just waiting to drop down their credit cards.
And and to cite, this is from Johnny Evans on Computer World. I mean, it seemed not for nothing. It seems in the earnings call they mentioned that there's 3 different companies offering, M1s to employees, and conference rooms are all going to be equipped with M1 Max. So I'll link that in the YouTube live chat if anyone wants to check it out. So certainly you just cracked the surface of the M1.
Yeah, and when you're talking about like price to value, I mean, it's hard not to look at the Mac right now. For right now, Amazon has a sale, it's $850 for the MacBook Air, and that's just like, I mean, how do you beat that? How do you beat that?
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you both so much for calling in and chatting with me. I think that this was a really interesting discussion. And I think that when I had first started talking about the chip shortage, I think it was on a lot of people's minds, like, okay, how is this affecting like me as a consumer or me as someone in charge of buying for this group at my company? And for a little bit, it was like, not really, unless you're looking to buy a car. But, now it's really seeming to affect a lot more sectors.
We knew at some point it would affect smartphones, and we knew it would affect Apple. It's just it was bound to happen. It kind of trickles.
Yeah.
So, but the line to buy the iPhone 13 starts behind Ken. So everyone get behind
that's right.
him.
So exactly. Yeah. If anyone has issues buying an iPhone 13, let us know. It'll happen, 6-ish weeks, 6, 8, ish. It's the operative word. All right. Well, thank you both so much for calling in and chatting with me. I really appreciate it. And thank you all so much for watching this episode of Today in Tech. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you are watching on LinkedIn, head over to our YouTube channel, IDG Tech Talk, and you can subscribe there. You can give the video a thumbs up over there. And over there, you can also hit the bell icon so you're notified every single time we post a new video. If you have any questions because you're watching this after the fact, or we're wrapping up live now and we didn't get to your question, please do let us know in the comments, especially on the YouTube comments. I will certainly get back to you with any specific questions. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.